How you doing, folks? You're watching Onward with Onrie. I'm your host, Onrie Compen. And actually, it's not just Onward with Onrie, it's Onward with Onrie Live. And today's guest is actually the person who inspired me to do this show in the first place. I was a guest on his one of his panels that he had for an online convention. He is a true go-getter. We've known each other for a couple years. I consider myself to be extremely honored to be working in the comic book field at the same time this guy is. I am watching this guy. I am learning from this guy. Folks, sit back. We got a great guest, Russell Nohelty. Russell, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and thanks for such an awesome introduction.
Well, I try. So here's what I wanted to do. Rather than kick this off with what's going on right now, I wanted you to kind of tell us like what your origin story is. Cause that's like, as I was coming here, I'm like, I think we started talking in like 2017. And at that point I'm like, where did this guy come from? So I want to know, where did you come from? What brought you to where you are today?
Sure. So, condensed version. I was born in New Jersey. I grew up in a suburb of DC called Woodbridge, Virginia, outside in Virginia. Obviously, I went to school there, and from kindergarten through I graduated high school, same little town, and then I went to college at the University of Maryland, where I got a degree in broadcast journalism and sociology. I also met my wife there, and we have been together since 2001. So what does that make it? Almost, oh, sorry, 2004. So that makes it
16 years.
almost 15, over 15 years.
Yeah.
And so I graduated in 2004 with a degree in broadcast journalism and sociology. And I then started working on Capitol Hill. On Capitol Hill, I was doing live shots with senators and congressmen like John McCain and Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein and John Cosign and a whole bunch of others. Like I met a ton of senators and important people there. I covered an Easter egg roll. I worked on a background for Comedy Central, and I did a whole bunch of cool stuff while I was there. And then I left and I started my own photography company called RPN Photography. And I shot movies. I went to Denmark on a movie. I shot my own movie called Connections, which you can find on YouTube. It's very mediocre, with my company BNS Media Group. And then I got in a car accident in 2008, in January 2008, and I couldn't do any of that stuff anymore. All I could do was write. And so I set about writing as many scripts as I could, as fast as I could. I had heard that the first 10 scripts are going to be garbage, so I just wanted to churn out 10 scripts as fast as possible. I was in a neck brace for about 6 months, and including at my wedding. It was awful. And so I ended my honeymoon also. And but I wrote a bunch of scripts. A couple of them got optioned. A couple of them got made into novels. But we moved out to LA right after our honeymoon in 2008. I had been fired from my job as an executive producer of a internet television company, and she was now on break from being a teacher, and it was the perfect time for us to move out here. So we moved out here in 2008, and we've been here ever since. I tried to get work as in writing, as in movies or television or something in that vein. It didn't really work very well, but my manager in 2010 showed me what comics had become. She gave me a stack of a bunch of independent comics and said I should look into maybe doing comics. And I read a bunch of indie stuff that was coming out from Image and Devil's Due and a bunch of indie comics, a bunch of indie companies, and I kind of fell in love. And so I set about making comics, and I've been making comics and writing novels ever since.
And Russell, one thing I want to say is you're not just making comics. There's something I want to give you absolute credit for. It's the production value in your finished books that are just truly mesmerizing. Like you're not just putting out like, here's my here's my comic. I did everything and it's just out there now. You actually took the time, and I've supported your Kickstarters before, and I have the Monsters anthology, and just the cover of that book, the way it's printed up, it's really something that no dummy can just do. You can't just say like, all right, I want to make a comic and make that. You have an actual eye for this, and you have actually, you're a skilled publisher.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I
Tell
thought
us
it was
about
really important that. So one of the things that drew me to comics was that you could make a world-class comic for like a fraction of what you could make a movie for. I'd always been very concerned with making something that felt as good as the best out there. I've always believed in like pushing the limit of what I could do. But it was not. It was only worth it for me to do comics if I could make a comic that was as good as anything Marvel or DC put out. And I think that Ichabod, Katrina, and Pixie Dust and our monster anthologies, they rival any other company. I mean, I don't think of them as being indie published. I think of them being published, and
I like that.
I think of the same way in our books, or like there's a lot of like your books are beautiful inside as well, and there's a lot of people that do it at a high level. And whenever someone talks about like down about self-publishing or independent publishing, I just look at them and I'm like, what world are you living in? Like I could give you stacks this high of like comics that are amazing that are published by just some guy. And you would have no idea if I told you that like it was published like out of someone's basement. You have no idea because they look look as beautiful as anything else.
Boom started out of a garage. I mean, look, the biggest companies that have had the most tremendous impact on today's society started from garages. That's bands start from garages.
Right?
All kinds of stuff. And I like what you said a lot because you're talking about contending. When I made Yusun Shin and Marks, I thought to myself, is this going to be held up to the same standard as, something that Marvel and DC puts out? Because if it's not, then it's not good enough. And you have to push yourself because you're not competing with them, but you're competing with them. Like you have
competing with the mental space that they have,
of course,
in someone's mind. And it's so when someone opens up my books, I want them to not have any reason to say no, except that they don't like the concept or like they don't like the art style, because like art style is subjective. There's a lot of books that I can say look great, but they're just not the kind of thing that I respond to. So like I get it if you're going to say, well, like I understand the artistry of this, it's just not the kind of thing I like. Or if you don't like fantasy, or if you don't like the kind of like, that's okay. It's okay. But I did not want someone to open my books and have a reason to say no, except for that reason. I also trying to think how to say this nicely about myself. I was not very confident in my own writing ability back then. So I figured that if I had just a banger artist, I could at least like
you'd be inspired to be
movie.
Yeah. You'd be inspired
make a confident book. Yeah, it's like well, like I've got to now rise to this level of this artist, and at least if the writing was bad, the editing could be good and like the book could be good. So maybe I could get a job as an art director or editor or something else. Even if people didn't like the book. I mean, I was willing to throw every dollar to make Ichabod Jones away. In fact, I signed a publishing deal with that, knowing it was a terrible publishing deal. Just being like, I don't care. I need something out there to show. So like, I'm probably going to lose the $8,000 or $10,000 I spent on this book before I took it back. But I wanted it to be the thing that people talked about, so that when I did my next book, I could hope to make money on it. Now, that book has ended up making me over $100,000 at this point, so like it's done very well for me. But I was willing to waste all of it just to like show people that I should be taken seriously. And I don't necessarily think that I recommend that necessarily, but I do think that a couple of things. First, uh, you've got one shot to like make people to impress people, and if people aren't impressed immediately, then they're probably going to turn away and not care and not give you a second shot for a while, because people have this perception of you that like it's like burned in there, and no matter what you do, good or bad, like it's hard for them to like leave that mental image. And you've got to be willing to make the product amazing. One thing I like about comics is even if you don't like talking, I don't like talking about myself and my work, or really my part in the work. What I always liked about comics is that uh, I could like just talk about Renzo's art. I didn't have to talk about the story. I could just like talk about Renzo's art, and if I didn't believe in the story, at least I would believe in the art behind it, and I could like, like I helped Juan get his career started because Juan Frigeri, the artist for Katrina Hates the Dead, ended up working for Dark Horse and then Marvel. But like Katrina Hates the Dead was his first book, and like I would take it around and I would show everybody. And so like I'm sure that it didn't have a huge impact, but it probably had some impact of like
It had
me
enough impact
talking
to get
about
him. It had enough impact to get him work. And the thing I'll say that to Russell is, you and I are like complete opposites in the sense that here you are putting out as much content as you possibly can, and I got one book that I put out every Shrove Tuesday, and yet our approaches are also different in the sense that when I pitch, I want to talk about the book, I want to talk about the story, and let the art speak for itself. Whereas you want to talk about what the artists contribute, and you've been a real champion for a lot of creators, artists in particular, in our field, and all of them talk about what it was like working for you and how you helped them. And here you are telling me about the artist on Katrina and how he went on to getting work at Dark Horse and Marvel. I think that's really fantastic. I mean, you came into this business with the mindset of growth, and you have your approach, which of course is unique to you. Like I think that's what makes what we do so fucking cool, is that like we both have like such different approaches that we can learn from each other,
Right.
And particularly one area that I really want to learn from you in is Kickstarter, because you're just a fucking beast on there. I cannot fucking do what you do on Kickstarter. It's amazing.
Well, it took doing that first anthology. Honestly, it took all of these people coming together and believing in the process, and like that one Kickstarter that like all buoyed us together. It all bound us together, and it all was a way for Wannabe Press to really get off the ground and take all of these little audiences that we all had, me included, and all the other people, and sort of like mold them into one like sort of like gigundo audience that could like move mountains. And the minute that I saw what that kind of community can do, like my life was forever changed, because all of those people like put themselves on the line to tell people that I was worth like investing in. They all put their cachet on the line to say, you should go back this book. And I don't think that I understood it when I made it, when I made the book, because it's really hard to understand what putting your name on the line for something is until you've put your name on the line for something that isn't yours. And now that like no one had ever hired me before, so like I never had that experience. Now I'm in other people's anthologies and I'm in other people's conferences, and like I spend a lot of time wondering, like, is this worth putting my career on the line for, to like be part of this thing? And so I really respect that these people, having never worked with me before, trusted me enough to like put their faith in their audience's faith in me. And I have a responsibility to that, to make a product that is going to blow their minds in the way that I can. Like, the best way that I could at that time was the Monsters and Other Scary Shit book. And then it became the Cthulhu book and the other books. But when you said, when you talked about like my advocacy for artists, I had one very simple goal when I started. It wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about anything. It wasn't about like even being read. What it was about was that every artist or person that I collaborated with for my whole life would look back at their career at the end of it and say that working with me was one of the best experiences that they had. Maybe not the best book they had, but I couldn't force like my writing to be better than it was, but I could do everything I could to make sure that the people that I worked with had an amazing experience and walked away better than what they were, and walked away like with positive feelings that they would bring out into the world. And I thought that would echo and ripple out around me.
The only reason why I laugh when I say this is because, again, I'm the complete opposite. I'm just like, I work my artists very hard. I'm not an easy person to work for, in the sense that I want high quality. But the people that I've been working with understand that, and they've stuck with me. But we've been through shit together, because it's like they'll spot something, and I'll tell them, like, I'll spot something and I'll be like, you got to fix this. Sorry, like, you got to fix it. If I see an error, I'm going to make you fix it. In fact, I've gotten so controlling over my production process that my co-writer and I, David Anthony Kraft, we actually do the layouts for our book, because we have a very specific vision in mind. Yusunshin's a limited series. It's it's a standalone thing when we're really trying to build it up. So it's a very different thing. So I don't know if I have the same idea of making everybody's experience wonderful. I don't want to be somebody you can't tolerate working with, but at the same time, it's not about, in my opinion, and I love where you're coming from, but in my opinion, I'm like, if it's not serving the story, the audience isn't going to give a shit at the end of the day. If my artist didn't, if my artist meant to draw a girl, but it looks like a boy, he's fixing it. That's just it, and I'm not gonna. If I see that you can't do it, then I move on. It's one of those situations where I think it's important to pay attention to what your audience gets at the end of the day. Because, you and I, we both hit the convention scene hard. And not only are you successful on Kickstarter, but you're also very successful on the convention front too. And we both know what it's like getting out in front of the table or behind the table, or wherever the fuck you go, getting out there, setting up, and actually using this as a means of making money to have an income. And getting out there and pushing is one of the hardest things. And if you don't have confidence in the finished product, if you're doubting something, it's going to affect how you feel. But in this case, I think, like, with your anthologies, you've given the creators the freedom to tell their short stories, and if I'm understanding correctly, and you've given them the chance to get out there and express themselves within, the guideline of the story or of the theme of your anthologies. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, so I come from a world where I've started many companies and I've run many sales teams, and my philosophy, and I've made movies, and my philosophy has always been like, if you hire right, your job is pretty much done. And so I spend an inordinate amount of time hiring correctly. And I do have, there are errors in every issue of Ichabod.
Well, sure. No, yeah.
But I'm very forgiving of most of the errors, even if things like in the first issue of Ichabod, especially, there's a panel where Ichabod like is very off model, and like luckily Ichabod and the kind of style that I have is less about precision and more about feeling. Like Ichabod especially is about you being inside of this
character's head. Yeah.
This character's head, looking out and seeing that the world is kind of fucked up, and that you don't know what reality is. So, and a lot of times bending the will or bending that to make it look weirder than it actually is actually services the story. I was very conscious when I started writing comics that I had never done a long form series before. So one thing that I think writers don't do often, or artists too, is they don't understand the skill level that they're at and how to utilize that skill to make something great at wherever they are. So I can't draw,
Yeah, neither can I. I
um,
can't draw for shit.
but I drew a book. It's called
Yeah.
Gherkin Boy and the Dollar of Destiny. It's
Is
about a
that
pickle.
what about the beat picture in the background? Is that you too?
Oh yeah, I
You
painted
drew
all of
that.
that.
I
Yeah,
can't even. I can't do that.
well, so
But go on. Go on. I'm
so
sorry.
I made this book called Gherkin Boy and the Dollar of Destiny. It was about a pickle that falls into a black hole and it's on an adventure across the universe to get back home. It's awfully drawn, but like it's absurdist comedy. So like it's okay. It had a very zany feel. So like it's okay. It was okay that it felt like that. And the story was just ridiculous. It was about a pickle and a fork and a stick and like professor, a naked professor, and all of these ridiculous things that would happen. And I think that it ended up pretty great because it was completely absurd. I when I did Ichabod, because I didn't know how to maintain continuity over many issues, I decided that he would be crazy, because then I could move between reality and perception, and I could move between these worlds, and like the mind fuckery part of it became a feature of the story. And so I took something that was a deficiency in my ability to tell long form story, and I figured out like how to turn it into a strength, which was in making Ichabod not know if he's killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head. And that came from a very real place of fear that I would screw up telling this story if I didn't have an out. And I really I counsel writers and artists all the time to really try to have a objective analysis of your of where they are now, so that they can tell something that really works for them. One of my favorite artists is Angela Odlang, and she's great at this. Like she's great at like knowing the thing that she's good at and doing that thing and falling into this like magical whimsical world, and like not really worrying about reality. If she tried to make like a Marvel DC book, she would fail miserably at it because that's just not her art style. But I so often find artists that are like trying to push through to this other level that they just aren't at
It
yet.
doesn't fit. Yeah, and it may not even fit like their MO. You know what I mean? It's like you're telling me you're not downplaying. You know, it was Angela was the artist.
Yeah.
You were just saying you're not downplaying her. You're saying she's got strengths in other areas that go beyond Marvel and DC. Because let's be honest, the only reason why we hold them up on such a high pedestal is because they're the ones that get the most press. They're the ones
Right.
who have the most muscle in the industry, and they're the ones who basically dictate the direct market, which honestly makes up a very small portion of the entire marketplace of comics. Like, yeah, we can go to conventions. It's like they're the draw-in, sure, but like there's so like what we both know from doing these shows is that there's lots of creators like us. There's lots of independent publishers. There's lots of guys who are trying to just find their own marketplace. They don't care about Marvel and DC. They're not trying to do what Marvel and DC is doing. They're doing their own fucking thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be up to their standard, because let's be honest here, between us, you know, their standards are not what they once were. It's not Marvel Comics can't be held to the same standard it was back in the days of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. You know, it's a completely different company now. I'm not saying that it's all shit. There's a lot of great stuff coming out now, but it's just not on that same level. It's at the level of what's going on today, you know?
Well, on top of that, like what I love about independent comics is that it really shows you the breadth of what comics can be, or what
Absolutely.
books can be. You know, Angela's story is wonderful and magical and incredibly professional looking, but it looks nothing like Ichabod Jones' Monster Hunter, which looks nothing like Katrina Hates the Dead, which looks nothing like your books, which looks nothing like Umbrella Academy. There may be influences there, but there's a huge scope of what comics is. And part of the reason that I really I want people to be able to explore that in the anthologies. I think if nothing else, being able to pick up a Cthulhu is Hard to Spell book or a Monsters and Other Scary Shit book and seeing the wide range of what a comic can be will open someone's mind up to what they can consume as a reader. And having the ability to play or try different styles was always really important to that. And a big part of my my work has been about trying to get artist buy-in. That's how I kind of make sure that, or knock on wood, hope that an artist will stick with the project. I believe I try and make them stick with the project because they have a buy-in that like their part of it is essential to the production of it. And part of why I have the philosophy that I do is so that an artist has that freedom and feels agency and has a connection to the book so that they don't abandon it after issue 2, because like I've seen that with way too many people. And then when it worked on the first book, I tried it on the second book, and I tried it on the third book, and then and I tried it on the anthologies, and it really worked for me to be able to say, do you think this is up to the standard of this book? And if I can say that to the artist, and the artist has agency over like how good the book is, they tend to up their own game every issue, and they want it to be the best because now they're a part of it. Now they want it to succeed. And now it's not just a job. It's like a project that they feel they feel connected to. And if I can make that happen, if I can make the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell books, if I can make all of the artists love all of the other artists on that book, and not just love the story, but love the artists and find and make real connections and real friends and real community, I don't have to do much to tell people to promote it. Like I don't have to do much to get people excited about it, because all of the artists are friends with all of the other artists, or at least some of the other artists. And so it makes my job easier. I find I feel myself falling into the hippy dippy mindset part of this more, and like the soul energy resonance part of it.
You know what? That's good. That's a good thing. Go there.
So I do feel like when an artist really cares about a book, above more than just a paycheck, that like when you open that book you can tell like there's something about like them binding a piece of them to a page, or like you can tell the intricacy with how they did something. They went back and did it for the 5th time because they really wanted it to be right, as opposed to opening like a certain comics and you can just tell they rushed through it. Like there's something about it that like I want to work with artists who like pour their soul into the books they work on, like I pour my soul into the books that I work on. And if I'm happy to pay them and like finance that part of it, but if I can't get the like
if you can't get the return on the investment, then
and I just won't, like I won't care about it as much. Like there's something about Renzo. There's something about Renzo, like his excitement for Ichabod, that like pulled me into doing the book again. Because for years he'd just be like, "Are we going to do more? Are we going to do more?" He would every like year or so he would always ask, and I was like, "Nah, I don't want to do more. I'm not going to do more." And eventually, like, it started to be like, "Wow, like." This person is like as passionate about this book as I am, and like maybe I should look at doing it. Maybe I should like try to get into this into Ichabod again. And part of that was because like he was persistent. Like he introduced me to a publisher in Argentina so I could get it published in Argentina, and now we have an Argentinian book coming out in 2 months of Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter. So
not bad, Russell. Yeah, very impressive.
I don't know. I know it's kind of like woo-woo mindset-y kind of thing, but it really matters to me that the the artist feels safe and they feel free, and that they have a real connection to the book that goes beyond anything that, like, any amount of money that I'm paying them for the book, or whether that's for the anthology, because there ain't no money in anthologies, or the graphic novels. What really matters, what jazzes me up about doing it is working with somebody else that like gives a shit. And that goes to my my editor for novels, and my proofreader. Like, they really care about the work. Like, they care about my work. And that sounds egotistical saying that out loud.
No,
right
but
now,
you're saying that they're applying their skills, everything that they know, to make your writing work because they believe in what you're doing. They believe in the grand vision. You don't sound egotistical at all. In fact, I've never worked for you, but I'm very touched by everything you said. I'm deeply touched by it. Keep going.
I think it gives you better work too. I think it gives.
Yeah.
I think that, like, they put that extra level in that you don't give to and now, as a person who writes for other people and does, like, sometimes, like, you just take it because it's there, and, like, you're like, I like this one, but, like, it's not my best work. Like, I know it's not my best work. Like, I know, like, Karen will sometimes read pieces that I come back at and be like, it was good, but, like, and I was like, I know it's not my best work. I know it's not my best work. Like, I know, but, like, it got in the book, and, like, it was good enough for the thing. And then there are some that, like, either I really like the person or I really like the concept, and I, like, I give it that extra thing. I take that idea that I've been developing, and I'm like, maybe I'll trust them with this really juicy idea that I've been developing for a while. And, like, this is one that I've been holding back because, like, I'm so nervous. But, like, here it is. And, like, this is my extra special juice one. And part of that comes from, like, I've seen so many projects that I've developed, like, that I've really put my heart into. Like, I'm now seeing them come to fruition, and, like, my heart breaks looking at the production quality of them. Sometimes, like, I'll look at the binding, or it'll be a floppy instead of a trade, or, like, there'll be something, and I've learned to kind of close myself up to some projects because like, I knew that my heart was not being cared for properly, and I never wanted that to happen for Wannabe Press. I wanted somebody to give me the thing that that like makes their heart sing, and I will take that and like cradle it like a baby bird, and like give them back as much or more than they're giving to me. I have always said that I will never be the weak link in a chain. If somebody, when we were doing the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, people would keep hitting me up. Hey, do you want to be on this show? Do you want to be on this show? Do you want to do this? And I'd be like, no, but like, you're giving me the energy, man. And if you're going to give it, I'm going to take it.
Absolutely. So, Russell, this brings me to an interesting question I had for you. So, you know, you've obviously come at this with a background that differs from mine completely. I mean, prior to getting into comics publishing, I was working for a hedge fund and doing very remedial shit. Like, basically, I was a golfer. All right. And I left my job to go and pursue a career in comics. You have had this entire career. You've had multiple careers, prior to deciding that, like, you're going to do comics. How have those experiences had an effect on who you are now and, your incredible mindset, when it comes to art? Because you've had an interesting, diverse, you're working in journalism, political reporting in particular. You worked with certain politicians. Those areas don't allow for as much flexibility as, say, something like comics, where our objective is to entertain rather than to inform or to do something else that's more politically driven. So how have all those experiences melded you into the Russell that you are today?
So I worked for Sprint, and I worked for on Capitol Hill, and I worked shooting other people's movies, and I I realized that, you know, you can make a good living doing other people's stuff, but like if you really want to be happy, I needed to be making my own thing, and I needed to be working with people who cared, because like on nobody really cares on Capitol Hill, like at least like on the shooting side of it. Like there's not a lot of I didn't run into a lot of other cameramen who like cared about like cuz it's the same shot. Like you're literally just setting up like this shot like 30 times a day. And like there's not a lot of artistry in it. It's good money. So like there's not a lot of not a lot of people are like, "Well, that's I'm like so passionate about like this like how I'm doing the lighting, because the lighting is like you do 3 lights and it's always the same." Um I would go onto movies, and the directors and producers were passionate sometimes about it, but like there wasn't a lot of passion among the rank and file people that were there, and people weren't like people weren't infusing themselves with the work. And I own a Verizon dealership, and I worked for Sprint, and I understand that. Like I don't care about Sprint. Like I don't care about phones. Like, I just don't care. I've had my same phone since like 2015, and like I just don't care. But I did care deeply about the experience that my customers and my clients had. Uh, and so I brought that part of it with me when I started my publishing company. And I had a very high standard for what I gave my clients, like very high. And it made them be able to mindlessly buy from me without me. I would call them and be like, hey, I think you really need to do this thing. And they would just be like, okay. And I would just like it would be done. And I wanted that sort of interaction where people would just know that Wannabe Press or Russell Nohelty or whatever the project, Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, was just, they could mindlessly back it because they knew it would be good. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to like affect that change or that like mindset. Um, but I knew that that was like the trick. The trick was not getting someone to buy the first time. The trick was getting somebody invested so deeply that they talked to everyone they knew about your books, and they mindlessly came through, and they would just buy it. And I don't mean mindless in the bad sense, like dumb. I mean
Like
they
it's
didn't
not, it
have to
doesn't
put them
require thought. I know
right.
exactly what you mean.
Yeah, they don't. They just
Yeah,
don't have to. They have no. There's no brain power needed to know that that my book will be worth the money that I'm
yeah,
charging it.
yeah.
Um, and like people have that all the time. People have that uh, with uh, with uh, with celebrities, or with directors, or with
Absolutely.
other writers. People mindlessly buy Stephen King or uh, or J.K. Rowling or whatever the thing is. They just mind because they know what the package is going to be, and 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 so I've been very cautious about that from the very beginning. Even when I was working in a bunch of different genres, I think comics I've been much cleaner with than novels. Comics, it's pretty much been fantasy horror, or action, or mythological fantasy. Has kind of been a pretty consistent through line throughout. Novels, I've been all over the place, but I'm trying to become more consistent so people can mindlessly buy the novels too and know what I'm going to deliver. But so having these other projects, or having these other companies, really showed me like what I was passionate about. Like I'm not passionate about phones, but I'm very passionate about the community and the customer experience, and I'm very very concerned with the way that my coworkers and are treated as well. And I think both of those go hand in hand. Like I want people to have an amazing experience so that when I go out into the world with it, I don't have to worry that somebody is bad mouthing the book. Like, when you got 70 creators working on a book, like, I don't want there to be negative energy out there for it, because I don't want someone to come to my table and be like, "Oh, I heard about that book and how hard you are as an editor. I'm not buying it." Which is less hard. It's less likely when you're doing like a book with one artist or like one book, but it's very easy when you start doing anthologies or a lot of different projects to be that company. And we all know those companies that, like, in comics, that like people complain about but still work for. That, like, if they just went away or another company came through and charged and paid the same rate, they would happily go work for that company. And the
Just
only
for the
reason that,
experience, yeah.
yeah, it's there are companies that exist because, like, they have the ability to keep paying. And
Of
that
course.
is one of the craziest thing about comics is there are comic companies that I cannot believe still exist, but they exist because they keep paying and artists keep working for them, and so they can keep the license going. But, like, there is nothing but bad energy from that company in the
Absolutely.
creative community.
Absolutely.
And
And it's interesting because, your career has moved in such a, let's just put it this way, and this is me being, I put myself in the same category. You went from all these like lucrative positions to comics. Not to say that there's nothing lucrative about comics, but you don't go from working at Sprint to journalism to film, and then most people don't. Not saying that you just don't in general, but most people don't look at comics and say that's the next thing. This is where I want to invest my time. This is where I want to take losses. This is where I just want to pump shit out. This is where I want to, like, I don't care how much I fail so long as I can eventually succeed. Most people can't commit themselves that largely after working for companies that provide stable paychecks, insurance, all these things that are essential for basically living, right? And you've gone the opposite direction, and I find that fascinating.
so here's the thing. When you really break it down, we very much undervalue our time. So even if you make $100,000 a year, you are basically, if you are working 40 hours a week, which you probably, if you're making $100,000 a year, you're working 60 to 80 hours a week. But if you were working 40 hours a week, you were making $50 an hour. That means that if you're killing it and making $100,000 a year, you are loaning yourself out and saying that I'm willing to give up time with my wife, time with my dog, time with my family, time pursuing the things that I love for $50. And when I was working, I was not making $100,000 a year. I think my best year I made 75,000 or
Which ain't
80,000, something like
which
that.
ain't nothing to sneeze at.
No, it's not nothing to sneeze at,
I
and
ain't
like
seen
it
money
definitely
like
helped me
that
make
yet. Yeah.
comics. But that's still $40 an hour. Like, that's still $40, which, like, that's not a lot of money. That's like your time is invaluable and precious. And I found that when I was working at these companies, I would still be coming home and working on books and like comics and all this other stuff. So now I'm like working for another company and telling them like I'm only worth $50 an hour, and then I'm coming home and working on my own stuff. And it like
You'll
I
be
figured
lucky
if
if
I
you
could,
make $50.
yeah, I figured like if I could make $20, $10 doing the thing that I loved doing, or that I was doing anyway, it would be better. But I didn't actually have a choice. So I guess I've never told you this story, but I'll tell you the story of how I actually left my last job. So I was sales manager at this Sprint dealership, and the beginning of 2015, they decided they wanted to open a Verizon dealership as well. And I told them that I would help them open their Verizon dealership. They wanted to partner with me, with there's three of us, to open this Verizon dealership and be able to like basically service Verizon and Sprint clients, and like kind of open the market up. And I said, I will do this for you. I will put my energy into it, but I will not do it if you change your mind in 6 months. Like, that's the only thing I ask you is, if I do this and I get this up and running, do not screw me and uh and um and uh and screw and say that you're not doing it anymore in 6 months. And so I poured my energy into it. I gave my clients up, my like gold clients, my like prized possession clients up to other reps, because I could not have clients and then also have Verizon. So I decided that I would take the Verizon dealership and I would give all of my Sprint clients away if I could not bring them over to Verizon. And so I spent 6 months building that company up. And 6 months later, almost on the dot, they were like, we can't do this. Sprint's not letting us have both dealerships, so we have to give up the Verizon dealership. You can come back and work for Sprint again. And I was like, no, I can't. The literal only thing that I told you to do was not fuck me in that way. Not even other ways. I didn't even tell you not to fuck me in other ways. All I said was, do not tell me you cannot do this in 6 months. And so I said, I can't do this. I'm gone. I gotta go. I can't work. I don't trust you anymore. Like, I can't work for a company I don't trust. And so I took the Verizon dealership. I paid them out, and that's how I have a Verizon dealership now, because of that situation. On top of that, in 2014, I did my first Kickstarter for Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, and about a month before I left my company, I got a pallet of books. It was about $1,000, and all I had at that time, and I had an invitation from my friend to sell at his table at San Diego Comic-Con, and so those were the only 3 assets that I had, and I left that job because of trust. I left that job not because it didn't pay well, but because I did not trust what was happening. And I couldn't, and so since that day, I've said I could never have that same experience in my company. If I say something, I'm going to go through with it. If I promise somebody that they're going to get paid, they're going to get paid within 1 day of me getting an invoice. If they need more time, I am going to give them more time, and I'm just going to figure it out. Like, I'm going to eat all of it, so that they can have trust and faith in me, because I never want to experience the hurt that I had with those 2 people that I trusted so deeply. And then I watched them move on so easily without me. And I said to myself, nobody is irreplaceable. Nobody is irreplaceable in the world, but I want to make a company where everybody is irreplaceable. That, like, it is only in us being together and doing this thing at this special moment in time that makes this book possible. And if you take any singular cog away, it will not work. It will not work nearly as well as it does now. So it is vitally important for me that people hit their deadlines, because that is trust. And if you don't hit your deadlines, I can't work with you, unless you tell me that you need more time. And then sometimes I can help you, sometimes I can't. But it is so critically important to me that trust is built, and that faith is built, and that there's that idea that we are all making this thing. And what makes it special is not the binding of it. It is the creation of it. And that is kind of my secret sauce also for Kickstarter. You asked how I do, how I do. So, like,
I did, yeah.
My secret sauce for Kickstarter is that I believe 100% truly in my bones that every person who backs my Kickstarter helps me make that book. They are the only humans who will ever help me make that book, besides the people that created it. But the people that back, the reason that Kickstarter is special and magical, and I think I'm able to, like, do what I do on it.
You don't need to think. It's true. It's just you've achieved these results. You know,
but so the reason I think
don't undersell it. Yes.
But
No,
the
of course.
reason I think I've achieved these results is because I have, for years, like deeply embedded in the bones of Wannabe Press, is that not only do I make the book with people, but we make a book together and we all bind a little piece of ourselves in the creation of that book. And that is a scary fucking thing to tell the creator because most creators are are very precious on their books and what comes out of the book and how the book looks and like making it an experience. But I am very concerned that the soul of the book resonates with as many people as possible. And that means bringing in a lot of people. That means committing, like making them understand that they are integral to the process and, and, and that they are irreplaceable to me. Even if I theoretically could replace them on a book, that would make the book not the book that it is.
No, that's really well said, man. And it's like and you so clearly put how you brought your corporate experience into this, and you took your corporate work just as seriously as you take your comics. And you've given me a completely different view on Kickstarter in general, because I do have a lot of faith in the work that my team and I have done, and I believe in what they've, basically all of your philosophies. I'm not even going to repeat it. It's exactly how I see and how I treat the people that are committed to me. Because we don't work in a business that allows for people to fuck us. You get fucked once, that's it. And you have to come to depend on people. There's a reason why I've managed to keep my team together for a decade. And, you've obviously built this reputation of being somebody that people can depend on. That goes a very long way. And that's something that, when you get up to like companies like, Marvel, DC, all the way down to like, say, Dark Horse, there is so much shit that happens behind the scenes that like is shocking to me, like sexual harassment, like just stuff that has nothing to do with making better content. Like these are guys who are taking advantage of a situation, taking advantage of their customers, their fans, their coworkers. And I think it makes me feel very good as a creator that there are guys like you out there, that there are actually genuine people out there that are not going to take advantage of, but encourage to build, so that we have something left to remember us by. And I think that's a really key thing. Like we can't be without that completely. Like there's the bullshit, but the bullshit doesn't run the game. We know about it, but it's not necessarily what defines the industry as a whole.
Yeah, so one of the ways that I decided that I'm going to differentiate myself from the big companies is the big companies often fuck with stores and they fuck with customers and they end series in the middle while like without finishing out stuff.
Yep.
And they screw the creators and all
Yep.
of those
Yep.
things.
Yep.
And uh and I decided that my differentiating factor is like I'm just not going to do those things, and I'm going to be kind as much as I can, and I'm going to treat people like more than a $20 bill as much as I can, because I mean, there's limits. There are limits to what I can do. Like I can't pay somebody $500 a page to do a book. Like I can't pay somebody.
No, but what you can afford, that's what you pay, and
Right.
and if
what
they
I
agree
can,
to it.
and one thing that I can give is my time and energy and effort. And uh, I believe that my time is invaluable, but I will spend it making the books and projects as well as I can, and that includes treating the artists and writers as well as I can, and that means treating the fans as well as I can, and if all that happens at the end of my career is is most of the people that I worked with saying that it was such a pleasure to work with me, then and that they, even if they say they didn't, even if they don't say that they like really loved the product at the end, if they just say like that was such a pleasant experience, then I feel like I've done I'll have done my job. I think that the books that I put out are amazing, and I work with amazing people, and I've had an amazing career somehow. I don't still sometimes can't believe that I have put out as many books as I can. Like on the back behind me are like just stacks of not even all of my books, just some of them. And it blows my mind that I've been able to have my part in so many projects. But but it means nothing if, to me, it means nothing if like the people that I worked with were not treated well, that they didn't have something more tangible than just the book, that if the book didn't mean something more to them, um, even if the book wasn't the best book in the entire world, that it still meant something to them, whether that was the connections they made or just the experience of having the book printed. You'd be surprised, maybe you probably wouldn't, but you'd be surprised at how many people come to me as artists and say, this is the first time I've had my work actually printed in a manner that was actually reflective of how I thought it would be in my head. And like that means a lot when like I'm printing big beautiful books in like hardcover with like thick pages, and the art looks amazing, and all of those little details are how I show respect for the people I work with and for the fans that I work with, and I develop that mentality where people can just say, well, yeah, man, I'm gonna back it, like whatever. I don't, or I'm gonna buy it, or I'm gonna show up at his table and like talk to him because like I enjoy the experience. And we, as creators, are curating an experience every minute of every day. We're curating with our fans. You're curating with this show. Everything that I touch, I'm very conscious that I am curating an experience, and the experience that I want people to come away with, no matter what I charge them, whether it's free or $500, is holy shit, that was amazing. And I would pay for that immediately again. And if I cannot replicate that, I don't do it.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and if I can't put my own spin on it, I don't do it. If I don't see some way to take what's out there and spin it in a way that I either can make it 10 times better or have my special flair on it, like I don't do it. And that makes what I do so much easier, because now all I have to do is like when an opportunity comes to like make a virtual conference like we're doing this weekend, or work with somebody on a book, or bring someone into the Wannabe Press universe, I can say like, will this increase the value of what we're making or not? Will this increase the value of the Wannabe Press brand? And I don't mean monetary value. I mean like the like
Oh,
perceived esteem of the
Russell, I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to wrap up in 2 minutes here,
Sure.
and I want to give you a chance to tell people where they can find you. And I'm so sorry to cut you off. If you
No,
want
it's
to
cool.
finish, in fact, I want to give you the floor to finish your point, and I just want to let you know time's
Sure.
running out.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So if you want to see the kind of books that we make, if you're a reader, then head on over to russellnohelty.com. You can check out all of our books, especially if you like monsters and mythology. Monsters and mythology is kind of my jam. If you like novels, then the Godsverse Chronicles. If you like comics, you can check out the two Godsverse Chronicles comic books, Katrina Hates the Dead and Pixie Dust, or my dark fantasy Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, about a psychopath that escapes a mental asylum and becomes a monster hunter. Doesn't know if he's killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head the whole time. By going to my website, you can join our mailing list and get a couple of my books for free. If you are a writer or a creative type, you can go to thecompletecreative.com and get all sorts of free courses, epic blog posts, and the archives to my podcast. If you want to see sort of how I build an audience, you can go to thecompletecreative.com/audience and And you can watch our 20-minute video about how basically to build an audience from scratch.
Russell, thank you so very much. This was such a wonderful experience talking with you, learning from you. I'm taking away a great deal from this. So thank you again for coming on the show, for taking your precious time to come and share your experiences with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Take care, my friend. We'll be in touch soon.
Bye.
Mm-hmm. What an episode. Wow. Russell really knocked it out of the park there. I had so much more I wanted to talk to him about. And I honestly, I would have let things keep going. Unfortunately, I got to get going because there are 2 kids waiting for me and I got to take care of them. But folks, rest assured that next week I'll be back with 3 very awesome guests. We're going to keep doing this 3 shows a week now. I got some really great people lined up. And we're going to kick off next week. And I'll be telling you guys all about, who's going to be coming on. Just come follow me on Facebook. That's typically where I post. I'm still kind of like trying to figure stuff out on how to be like all more cross-platformy, but it's kind of hard between shrinking my posts for the sake of Twitter and certain pictures or videos that I share not appearing on Instagram. I'm still kind of figuring all that stuff out because I'm a fossil, believe it or not. And not just that, I'm not really techie either. I'm more of hey, just push this button and everything works. But rest assured, though, that I have people behind me who are steering me in the right direction and bringing me into present times because I plan on living forever. So as long as that's the case, I got to make sure that I'm somewhat up to speed. But thank you so much for tuning in today. I'll see you guys next week. 3 new episodes. Follow us on Facebook. Just follow me on Facebook. And, I'm still figuring all this stuff out, but I'll get there. I promise you, as I get everywhere. And I'll see you guys next week. Until then, onward to victory.